welcome to City Club of Portland's Friday Forum, Oregon's premier public affairs forum. I'm Sue Thomas, president of City Club, and I welcome you all. Those of you here at the Governor Hotel, and those of you listening on OPB or KBPS radio, or watching on Portland Community Media's CityNet 30. Thank you for joining City Club today on Friday, February 12th for this week's Friday Forum. Today we will hear from Multnomah County Chair Ted Wheeler about the state of the county. But first, some announcements. As always, in consideration of those sitting close to you and those in our TV and radio audiences, could you please silence your cell phones if you've not already done so? As always, we offer our appreciation to our Friday Forum corporate sponsors whose generous financial support make these time-honored City Club luncheons possible. Please join me in offering our appreciation to our winter quarter sponsors, Stoll Reeves, The Standard, and West Coast Bank. We greatly appreciate your support. If your company or firm would like to be a City Club sponsor, please contact City Club staff at the back of the room or call the City Club office. City Club offers unique opportunities to make a difference in the issues that are really important to our community. And for those of you who are here who are not currently City Club members, you may consider joining us on February 26th at Cork Wine Shop in Northwest Portland, where we're kicking off our spring membership drive. You can learn more about this on our website at pdxcityclub.org. At next week's Friday Forum, we will learn about the critical intersection between entrepreneurship, green markets, and the earth from speaker Margie Gardner, Chief Executive Officer of the entrepreneurial nonprofit Bonneville Environmental Foundation. And now to today's program. Today we will hear about the state of Multnomah County. We will learn how the county protected human and community services during an economic crunch and how community partnerships can help the county address future problems. Our speaker will also address the current challenges in maintaining public safety. City Club welcomes today the chair of Multnomah County, a longtime Portlander and Lincoln High School graduate. He earned a BA in economics from Stanford University. He then traveled east to the Ivy League, securing an MBA from Columbia University and a master's in public policy from the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. After graduating, he served as lecturer in the political science department at Northeastern University, and in 1993 published a book entitled Government That Works: Innovation in State and Local Government. He worked for several financial services companies before taking office in January of 2007. Please help me welcome today's speaker, Multnomah County Chair Ted Wheeler.
Good afternoon, members of the City Club, radio listeners, TV viewers, members of the media. Thank you all for having me here today. I just want to say how much I appreciate it. And before I jump into my speech, there's a couple of very important people in this room that I want to acknowledge. First of all, I'd like to thank my lovely wife, Katrina, who's sitting up here, who reminds me every day how lucky I am, and she's right. And I'd like to thank my staff for getting me here on time this year. And I'd also like to thank my dad. This is him sitting here in front. And last year he summarized my speech by saying, "I didn't like what you said, but I liked how you said it." So thank you for being here again, Dad. I'd like to start my remarks today with a quotation that I've reflected on for a long time. And frankly, it has more meaning for me as the years go by. The dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. As our case is new, so we must think anew and act anew. We must disenthrall ourselves, and then we can save our country. These words were appropriate when Abraham Lincoln first spoke them over 150 years ago. As a divided nation, looked to him to inspire them and lead them out of the wreckage of a bloody civil war. I thought these words were the appropriate ones to use in the introduction to my book on government innovation and change. And I certainly thought they were appropriate when presidential candidate Barack Obama used them to inspire an entire nation to hope and change, and through a deepening economic crisis. I also believe that they're the right words to set the tone for today's State of the County speech, because it's about adaptation to difficult circumstances, and it's about changing how we do business so that we can better serve our community. It's about thinking and acting anew. And I believe these words are particularly appropriate for a City Club audience because you convene for the very purpose of helping government think and act differently. Overwhelmingly, this year was about economic crisis, but it was also about success. We could have let this economic crisis halt our successes, but we didn't. We could have used it as an excuse, but we didn't do that either. Instead, we used it as a call to action. We used it as an opportunity to think and act anew. Multnomah County government has continued to do great things despite our economic challenges. And as a result, I think we're stronger and better today. That is the state of Multnomah County. I want to share some lessons I've learned and applied over the last year that were useful to me, and I hope they'll be useful to you too. Overall, I've learned that economic crisis is an opportunity to identify and embrace what's what's important to us, and then strengthen what works. Let me tell you how I've applied that at Multnomah County. My first lesson is this: identify what's important. To me and to my administration, this means protecting vulnerable citizens. It also means supporting children and families for long-term success. Now, that's easier said than done, isn't it? How do we do that when times are tough and resources are short? We did it by drawing a circle around those people in our community and the services we provide to those people who are most vulnerable, people who are older adults, people who live with mental illness, people who are struggling with poverty, people who have disabilities, people who are victims of crime. It not only makes good common sense for us to protect these citizens, I think morally it's the right thing for us to do. No crisis has focused my administration more than the death of James Chassie. We are thinking and acting differently today because of the lessons we learned from that terrible tragedy. In 2006, I joined Mayor Tom Potter and State Senator Avell Gordley to lead a task force to look at ways that we could address this issue around mental health in our community. We met one-on-one with many of our citizens who live on a daily basis with mental health issues, and we learned a lot from them. We listened to their stories. Our task force looked at the many connections that exist in this community between our mental health system and our criminal justice system. We asked ourselves some uncomfortable questions. For example, is it okay that the largest provider of mental health services in the state of Oregon are our prisons and jails? We should all be asking ourselves that question. The stories and the data led us to exactly the same conclusion. Community members told us there needs to be a place in this community where people can go if they have a mental health crisis that's not a jail and isn't a hospital. Our task force decided that we needed a new kind of facility that would address that need. For the last 3 weeks, my colleagues and I have been working hard to get the resources together to make that facility possible. It's now known as the Crisis Assessment and Treatment Center. It'll be a place where people can go if they're acting out, if they're a potential danger either to themselves or others, rather than to a jail or a hospital, but where they can get the appropriate treatment that they need. We've secured commitments from the county, the city, the state, and we've partnered with Central City Concern, who owns an appropriate space that can be remodeled for this important need. We have most of the capital construction dollars already committed, and now we're working hard to build a coalition of support to finance the operations of this clinic. We're going to do our level best to open and operate this facility no later than 2012. Something else I've learned: to effectively protect vulnerable populations, the services need to be where they are. That sounds pretty common sense. When I was growing up here in Portland, poverty was largely concentrated in the urban core. Things are a lot different today. Poverty in Multnomah County is predominantly located in East Multnomah County. In the Rockwood area, 70% of the kids are on free and reduced school lunches. 35% of the Rockwood net residents in the Gresham area are impoverished. 20% have no access to health insurance. There is a huge need in East Multnomah County to provide basic medical and dental services close to where people live. Just imagine that you're a young parent trying to get to a doctor's appointment miles away, traveling across town, managing a stroller, a toddler, 2 bus transfers, and a light rail ride. We're going to help that young parent. Today, I'm very proud to announce that thanks to a collaboration with Care Oregon, we will open a health and dental facility in the Rockwood community this summer. We project that the clinic will serve over 3,000 people in 2011, the first year it operates, and over 7,000 people by 2013. Care Oregon is investing over $3 million in this effort to purchase and renovate a facility for this clinic. I want to take this time to recognize Dave Ford, the Chief Executive Officer of Care Oregon, and Fritz Rankin, the Chief Operating Officer of Care Oregon, for their commitment to the vulnerable citizens in our community. Dave and Fritz, could you stand up and be acknowledged, please? Thank you. The new Crisis Assessment and Treatment Center for Mental Health and the Rockwood Clinic, they'll make us more effective by serving people where they are. But one of the best things that we can do is give young people and their families the tools they need for long-term success. Everyone in this room understands that there's a clearly established link between educational achievement and later economic success and self-sufficiency and independence. Last summer, Mayor Adams, and I know the mayor's here somewhere, Mayor Adams and I convened an education cabinet, including leaders from the business community, educational leaders, the faith community, and many, many others. Some are even here in this room today. He spoke about it in his address last week. I think it's appropriate to mention it again here today. Too many of our kids are not graduating from high school. Too many of our kids are not going on to post-secondary education and training opportunities. We looked for partners, and 75 businesses and many other organizations came forward to help us create the Youth Connect program to keep kids in school. Because people like Ken Thrasher helped, because Karen Gray helped, because PGE, Doug Stamm, Standard Insurance, TriMet, and dozens of other people stepped forward. 1,300 students who are the most at risk of dropping out in our community last summer took courses to catch up in school. They earned money in summer jobs. They visited work sites, they joined apprenticeship programs, they visited college campuses, and they were inspired by new possibilities for their own lives. I was fortunate enough to participate in one of the career exploration visits at Emmanuel Hospital. Kids got to watch an actual emergency room simulation. It's a fully functional emergency room complete with a rubber dummy. I can tell you, it was a lot more fun than a real visit to the hospital. Kids got to watch the nurses save the victim of a simulated cardiac arrest. And I got to tell you, it was intense and it was exciting. And when it was done, the kids had tons of questions, but they all boiled down to this: how can I get that really cool job? And you already know what the answer was. You have to have a bachelor's degree as a minimum requirement. The goal of the Summer Youth Connect program was to inspire kids to stay engaged with the schools. I'll tell you, you could see the light bulbs going on in these kids' minds as they connected the dots for themselves between this awesome job opportunity and their own educational achievement. It's a modest start, 1,300 kids, but it is a start, and we're going to continue to build upon our success. Another strategy we have for helping children and their families is our Sun Service Network. It turns 10 years old this year. Over 14,000 kids participated in Sun activities last year. At the core are our Sun schools, which provide services in support of academic success. They help kids stay in school, but they also have very good results. Over 75% of the kids who participated in Sun schools increased their benchmark reading. 77 increased them in math. Believe it or not, this program was once in jeopardy of being eliminated due to budget cuts. Now it's the core of our anti-poverty programs. Even in the midst of this terrible economy, we prioritize the Sun schools, and we increased them last year from 50 Sun schools to 58. Thanks to the school districts and the community organizations that made a huge commitment to make that happen. As long as I'm at Multnomah County, we're going to continue to expand the Sun School Network. The long-term goal for us and for our community partners is the same. Every school should be a Sun school. Educational achievement is obviously very important, but you know what? At the end of the day, it also has to be linked to good jobs. We look to the private sector for most of that job creation, but government has a very important role in terms of removing obstacles to employment. Multnomah County is particularly focused on people who have multiple obstacles to employment: communities of color, people with disabilities, older adults. Statistics show that 1/4 of African American men in our community are currently unemployed or underemployed. And frankly, I think the real numbers are higher than that. That's unacceptable. That is a lost opportunity for our citizens, for their families, and for our community. Small business is part of the key to success. It's the engine of our economy. You've heard that many times. And supporting businesses that represent the diversity of our community is a key strategy for overcoming obstacles to employment. I'm proud of the gains that we've made over the last 3 years around county contracts awarded to minority, women, and emerging small businesses. Our results are very good. In 2007, 14% of our contracts were awarded to MWSB contractors. Last year, the number doubled. Payment to these same contractors increased 21% over that same 3-year period. We got these results because we learned the importance of providing training and technical assistance to those contractors. We partnered with lots of community organizations to make that happen. Programs like this support small businesses and help create good jobs in our community and help families prosper. Another group that we're helping with job and career opportunities is older adults in this community. We're still working hard to build on the success of our Vital Aging Task Force, and Jay Bloom, I'm looking at you. At Multnomah County, we want to be a model employer for older adults. We're creating the flexibility in our employment options that would help us retain experienced adults who might otherwise retire. We're developing specific strategies to transfer a wealth of knowledge and experience from one generation to the next through careful and thoughtful planning. We're working with our local partners like Life by Design to help our employees plan for their active retirement with Multnomah County. And we hope to use this model for other businesses and organizations in the community. I want to talk to you about one more group of vulnerable people: victims of domestic violence. I need your help in reducing the terrible problem of domestic violence in this community. It's an uncomfortable subject to talk about for obvious reasons, but it's too important not to raise here today. The chances are very good that everyone in this room has an association with somebody who is either directly or indirectly a victim of domestic violence. It's a growing problem in our state and in Multnomah County. Did you know that in tough economic times, domestic violence increases? In just the last 30 days of 2009, 17 people died because of domestic violence, and 3 of them were children. We learned a lot over the last several years about this problem. We've learned that friends and co-workers of domestic violence victims often had part of the story, but they didn't intervene because they didn't know how. We've learned that domestic violence is still viewed by too many as a subject of shame. We've learned that this is an issue that cuts across all races and all income levels in our community. What can we do about it? We need to speak loudly and let victims know that they're not alone, that they are not responsible for their circumstances, and that we as a community stand ready to help. Our partnership with the City of Portland to open a domestic violence center in the near future will certainly help. But all of us in this room and listening on the radio and watching on TV have an important role to play. You can start by going to the county's new domestic violence website, and you can link to it through the county's main page, which is multco.us, where you're going to learn what to do if somebody you know might be a victim of domestic violence. It can also connect you with many of the great community organizations that work on this terrible and vexing problem. Let's go back to what I said earlier. I've learned a lot of things over the last year. Number one was protecting vulnerable people. Number two is embracing the values that guide you. The values that guide me are being responsible and being responsive. Every day, we at Multnomah County strive to be responsible with the resources which you have entrusted us with. During the last fiscal year, we reduced our expenses. We paid down our debt loads. We renegotiated contracts so that the county was being fully reimbursed for services. We funded our reserves in anticipation of weakening further economic downturns. Our employees played a huge role in helping us close that $45 million budget gap. Did you know many of our employees stepped forward and voluntarily gave back wage increases to which they were entitled under the terms of their contracts? They did that because they wanted to save jobs and they wanted to save services in our community. While we still face daunting budget challenges, we do have our financial house in order. Moody's recently acknowledged that by giving us one of the highest ratings they give to government institutions. Another value that guides me is being responsive to the community. Responding to the community means meeting changing needs. The library is a great example of where we're working hard to meet community needs. How many of you use our libraries? Wow, that's about 2/3 of you. Did you know that as many people visited our website this year, our library website, as actually walked through the door of one of our 17 library facilities? How many have used an online hold in the last year? You're not alone. That service has increased by 27% over the last year. So we're using technology to respond to the changing needs of our library users. And there's many more ways, too. If you can't attend a library program, don't worry. You can download it on a podcast. We now have Wi-Fi in all of our libraries, and we're implementing a modern inventory control system that not only protects and manages your valuable library collection, it helps us get books out to you much faster. And we're winning awards for meeting your needs. The Library Journal just awarded Multnomah County Library System a 5-star rating. We are the only library system in the state of Oregon and one of the few in the nation that have that rating. We also just learned that we are the recipients of the 2009 National Medal for Museum and Library Service, the nation's highest honor for libraries. Here's another example of being responsive to the community. It illustrates that we have to be honest about the challenges that we're facing. I've already talked a little bit about East Multnomah County, and by the way, I saw Gresham Mayor Shane Beam is here too. Mayor, thank you also for being here. Over the last 25 years, there have been 20 studies calling for the replacement of the East County Courthouse in Gresham. If you've been there, it's deplorable. The current facility, it's inadequate, it's tiny, and the roof leaks and sewage backs up through the basement. It's not an appropriate public facility. We've struggled to replace it, but we haven't given up. We had a time frame shift We had to reprioritize some aspects of the project, but we're moving forward. 2 weeks ago, we hired an architect for the project. It's been a long time coming, but we are responding to what is an obvious community need. We inherited a very tough problem. We're not going to pass it on to the next generation. There's another long-standing community need that we're addressing. You may have heard about this one. We need a new bridge. There's no project that's been more complex than replacing the aging Selwood Bridge. There's no project that has been as big for Multnomah County at $300 to $350 million. This is a project that was first identified as a community need over 4 decades ago. Again, we're committed to tackling this problem today and not passing it on to future generations. 3 years ago, I went to Washington, D.C., I would say rather naively, to ask our congressional delegation for both advice and financial support. What they told me, in the most polite terms possible, and I think rightly, was I didn't know what I was doing. They told me that we needed to build a regional consensus around the project, that we needed to envision a facility that would serve the needs of our community for generations to come, that we needed to find the lion's share of funding locally and then go back to DC to close the deal. Well, thank you, Congressman. At Multnomah County, we collectively took your good advice, and so today I can report on our progress. With full public participation, we chose an alignment. We have a regional funding plan that not only includes Multnomah County, it includes the city of Portland and Clackamas County, the state, the region. It will be a multimodal bridge. It'll meet our current needs in terms of traffic, our future needs in terms of traffic. It'll protect bicyclists and pedestrians. TriMet buses will once again be able to go over the bridge, and when the time is right, yes, it will also be able to accommodate rail. When I went back to Washington, D.C. recently, I got a very different reception. To a person, our congressional delegation pledged both their support and their leadership to get this project done. We will begin construction of the Selwood Bridge in 2012. Being responsible and being responsive. So that brings me to lesson 3. Don't worry, I only have 27 of these lessons. It's a joke, Katrina. Eat your dessert. Number 3, build on what works. The Board of County Commissioners works. Commissioner Deborah Kafoury could not be here today. Commissioner Jeff Kogan, could you stand? Commissioner Judy Shiprack, could you stand? Commissioner Diane McKeel, could you stand? And remain standing, please. Don't sit down. This is a prolific board of county commissioners. They fed the hungry, growing more than 13,000 pounds of food on surplus county land and creating a county food policy initiative. They housed the homeless, building a network of community partners. They helped kick the oil habit by putting solar panels on county buildings and increasing our energy efficiency. They made sure that everybody gets counted by giving mini grants to community groups to help with the upcoming census. They fought human trafficking, bringing law enforcement and the community together for united action. And that's just a small list of the many things that this group of people have done. Trust me, you are getting your money's worth out of this group. This board works, and I want to thank them for being such great colleagues. I also want to acknowledge District Attorney Mike Shrunk. I saw him walk in, County Auditor Steve March, and Sheriff Dan Staten. Thank you, gentlemen. While I'm at it, I also want to put to rest a perception that there's a growing conflict between myself and Sheriff Staten. Know this, I respect Sheriff Staten. We have an honest disagreement on the structure of the county jails, but it's ultimately the community that must make the final decisions. This is the right place to raise the issue, though, because the City Club, I think, can be particularly helpful in guiding the community towards good solutions. My point of view is this. Several independent studies have concluded that Multnomah County jails are amongst the most expensive in the nation. Others dispute that. This is an important issue to me because the jails account for the lion's share of our precious general fund resources. We spend as much money on our 2 jails as we do on all 17 of our library facilities and all 13 of our school-based health clinics combined. So even modest savings can make a big difference. As far back as 1998, Multnomah County Auditor Gary Blackmer suggested that the way we structure authority over the jails contributes to our increased costs. I would encourage the City Club to not only evaluate my ideas, but others and weigh in. I appreciate my relationship with Sheriff Staten, and I'm going to continue to work with him to address these and other issues. Collaboration works, communication works, and both Sheriff Staten and I are committed to both. Something else that works is promoting innovation. Innovation's always good for an applause line. In November of 2008, the Multnomah County Elections Office received more than 360,000 ballots, and it took till Thursday of election week to count them all. That made a lot of people very unhappy, and they said we should buy more ballot counting machines. Well, here's the deal. Each one of those things costs several $100,000, and we would have needed several of them, and we would have only used them a couple of days a year. In tight budget times, it didn't pencil out. So our elections staff innovated. They knew that they could report results earlier if they started counting earlier, but state law restricted ballot counting to election day only. The law's intent, of course, was to prevent people from knowing the results of an election prior to the closure of the polls. But our elections staff thought there might be a better way, so they collaborated. They worked with Secretary of State Kate Brown to put a law change in front of legislators. Of course, legislators wanted to know, all right, well, how will you protect the results if you start counting early? Here's the answer. What I have in my hands, and I realize most of you cannot see it, this is a $5 plug that fits into the back of a ballot counting machine. It's then covered with one of these. This is a 41-cent security seal. The tally is sealed in the counting machine until Election Day. Instead of hundreds of thousands of dollars for new ballot counting machines, we spent $5.41 on each of our 6 existing machines to get the job done. So what's the result? In last month's election, despite the fact that Multnomah County is home to 20% of the state's population, we were first in the state to report out our results. Total cost, $32, and a little bit of Multnomah County innovation. Here's an innovation that's on the drawing board right now, and my colleagues and I are discussing this. We all want to reduce euthanasia rates at the Multnomah County Animal Shelter. And the only reliable way to do that is to increase adoption rates. We plotted all of our customers on a map, and guess what we found? Because our shelter is located in Troutdale, the majority of the county's population in Portland wasn't going there to find their new pet. The innovation is an obvious one, a temporary animal adoption facility in Portland's Central City, conveniently located so that people can adopt animals and thus help us to reduce the euthanasia rates in our clinic. We're looking for landlords who love animals and will give us a good deal on a temporary clinic location. And we're looking for some volunteers who might be able to help us raise money to sustain this important project and ultimately replace it with a full-service Central City animal adoption shelter. Innovation works. Prevention also works. Let's consider obesity. I'm sorry to hit you with this over lunch. More than half the adults in Multnomah County are overweight or obese, and because of that, they face a much higher risk of heart disease, diabetes, and stroke. The cost to our state healthcare system is about $800 million a year as a result, and it prematurely ends the lives of too many of our beloved citizens. If we can reduce obesity, we can both save money and save lives. As a public health organization, we at Multnomah County must organize a broad coalition of community partners in order to solve this terrible problem. This will become a major focus of our work in the coming year, and my colleagues and I will convene a group of stakeholders, and with them we're going to work to increase levels of physical activity in our community, improve nutrition, and decrease obesity rates in Multnomah County. And there's other areas where we can be involved in prevention as well: drug and alcohol addiction, early childhood programs, juvenile justice and crime prevention programs. The list goes on and on. These strategies at prevention may be the most cost-effective way that we can deal with these critical issues. Over the next year, we're going to significantly step up our prevention efforts. You'll see us engage this coalition to begin the process of developing a Multnomah County prevention plan. I hope to talk to you about the results of that effort next year. These are just a few of the things we've accomplished and will accomplish in the coming months and years. Yet, this year was about economic crisis, but it was also about success. I'm very proud of what Multnomah County government has done and how we responded to the economic crisis. I'm proud that we prioritized our most vulnerable citizens. I'm proud that we've taken huge forward strides in being relentlessly accountable to our taxpayers and responsive to the needs of our communities. And I am most proud that we've focused on strengthening what works and innovating in areas where we know we need to improve. I have very high expectations of your Multnomah County government. I want it to be the most effective local government in Oregon and amongst the best in the entire United States, and I have great confidence that we can achieve that goal. I've told you a lot about what I've learned as county chair, but not the most important lesson. The most important thing I've learned, well, wear a helmet when you go skiing. Actually, the most important lesson I've learned, and I relearn it every day, is that we cannot become the most effective local government in Oregon without the support of the community and without the support of people like you. We don't have all the answers at Multnomah County. We're willing to try to solve some of the problems knowing that we don't have all the answers. And we're going to rely on you. We're going to call on you as engaged, informed citizens to help us weigh important options that are available to us. Well, that's my speech. These are the lessons that I've learned in a nutshell. Identify and embrace what's important, strengthen what works, be honest, and don't be afraid to ask the community for help. As we stand here at the start of the second decade of the 21st century, some truths endure. The dogmas of the past are inadequate. We must think anew. This is a room full of thinkers, so I'm putting you in charge of that. And we must act anew. Hold me accountable for leading those actions, but please join me and my colleagues in acting. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chairman Wheeler. The first question will be from our City Club host. Our host today is City Club Governor John Branham. John is the Director of Programs for Grantmakers for Education. John previously served as Director of Development for Portland Public Schools and spent 2.5 years in the Peace Corps in South Africa. John?
Thanks, Sue. And Chair Wheeler, thank you so much for your presentation today and for your leadership. Leading the county is not easy, and regardless of how folks feel about your decisions, we certainly appreciate the sacrifices and the stress that you endure every day. And now to my question. As a very well-educated person who has children and who is ultimately responsible for the county's education efforts via Sun Schools, as you've discussed, my question is about exactly that, education. Many in our community feel, including myself, that the vast majority of the higher level conversations had in our community about education are frankly not even close to the caliber we should be having. Without being too dramatic, those conversations strike at least me as being more akin to rearranging the proverbial deck chairs. Rather than talking about climbing Mount Hood, we must be talking about climbing Mount Everest, which you've of course done. So to my softball question, when and how are you and our other community leaders who work in and around education going to shift the conversation beyond programs to address the major structural reforms we need to make sure our kids are actually globally competitive and that our region is as well known for education as we are for sustainability? And what specifically does that new, more compelling conversation actually look like?
Excellent. Thank you, John. I think that's an excellent question. Here's how I'd answer it, because it's a big question. The answer is, again, and I don't want to sound pedantic, but it can't be, we need to reframe the question of education. Education is not the school district's responsibility. Education is everybody in this room's responsibility. We all have an important role to play. I'm looking over here at Veli Oakley, our head librarian. I believe at Multnomah County we're on to something. We have a structural solution that the rest of the nation is already looking at and they want to know more about, and it's in the form of our Sun schools. Mayor Adams and I are actually traveling to Washington, D.C. to address a group of community school leaders from around the nation to talk about the very real results we've had. So in part, it's engaging community partners because different aspects of the community have something different to engage. It's also about inspiring youth to remain engaged in schools. The mayor and I, through our education cabinet, have identified the #1 issue as just being keeping kids engaged in the system, making it relevant to them, not just looking at it from the perspective of the business community in terms of what skills they need, but looking at it from the youth. Make the connection the other way too. Inspire those kids to stay engaged in school because they want to have the skills to have the really cool job or that really cool post-secondary opportunity down the road. I think that's the basis of it. Oh, sorry, I have to move.
Sorry about that. We'll now take questions from the floor. Asking questions at Friday Forum is a privilege of City Club membership. When you ask your question, identify yourself as a club member and say your question in 30 seconds or less.
Jim Zarin, City Club member. Today's Oregonian has an article in the first page about the majority leadership in the legislature being unwilling to pursue kicker reform this session. And I'm curious, as the elected executive of our state's largest county, what your view is on the importance of coming up with some mechanism or mechanisms to stabilize our state budget, whether it's kicker reform or a new sales tax or whatever it may be. From your perspective, Multnomah County Chair, how important is this cyclical problem we've got in state government, and what would you suggest our legislature and governor ought to do about it?
Well, fortunately, as the chair of Multnomah County, I have the luxury of speaking my mind on this subject, so I will. We have a completely dysfunctional revenue system here in the state of Oregon, from the bottom to the top. And I want to be very clear. I'm not talking about amount of tax revenues collected. I'm talking about the actual structure of our revenue system in this state. It's boneheaded. There is no other state that wants to have a revenue system like ours. It has all of the problems and none of the benefits. Let me just give you a couple of examples. And I'm not in the legislature, so I can't speak to whether there was support and what pressures the leadership was under in terms of deciding on the kicker issue, specifically in this February session. I'm sure there's strategy involved in everything else. But here's the deal. We in our households in bad times, what do? We save. We hope that we have saved during good times for bad economic times to get us through. And by the way, that's what we did at Multnomah County with our reserves and paying down some of our debt stream. In this state, we don't do that. We have measures 5, 47, and 50, which limit the growth. We have no sales tax like many other states. In fact, most other states who are heavily dependent upon the income tax, which is a very volatile tax because it's dependent upon the economy. You could live with that maybe if you were collecting for a rainy day fund in good times to get you through the bad times when your income tax collapses. But we don't, because we have this uniquely Oregon thing called the kicker, where in good times we give back the excess. But don't worry, it really is just up to the state economists to predict within 2% what the revenue projections are going to be over the next biennium. Now, I don't want to diss economists. I'm sure there's several in the room, but I took economics, and I'll tell you what, most economists can't find their way to the classroom, much less predict the state revenue stream within 2%. And so I have a whole host of reforms. Number one, I would scrap the whole system. I'd start over from ground zero, because I guarantee you if you did that, this is not the system you would build. The one we have today isn't the system you would build. Let me give you a close-to-home example that I really do know about. Measures 5, 47, and 50. I know why they were put into place, and I understand the frustrations of our taxpayers in this state, and there were some very real examples that convinced the taxpayers in the state to take action. But there's been a real cost to measures 5, 47, and 50. The first year that measure 5 was implemented, $13 million of Multnomah County's revenue disappeared overnight. When measures 47 and 50 were implemented, $23 million disappeared overnight. If measures 47 and 50 had not been implemented, it caps our revenue growth at 3%, even though the costs of providing our basic government services grow slightly higher than that. If measures 47 and 50 hadn't been implemented in this fiscal year, we would have had over $100 million more in revenue than we have today. So, it's had an impact on our ability to provide basic services, even during the best economic times, and my colleagues know this well. We cut our budget. We have cut our budget every year since Measure 5 passed, and we will continue to do that because we can never grow our revenues faster than the costs of providing basic government services. Long answer, sorry. I'll be shorter.
I'm Susan Pierce, member, and in the interest of full disclosure, I'm a member of the City Club of Portland Research Committee currently looking at how Multnomah County delivers mental health care. The Crisis Center, which I'm very happy to see as a former emergency department nurse, fills a great need, but it will be 12 beds. And in addition to that, and the services that would be provided at the Rockwood Clinic, what else is being done to provide or support mental health care in Multnomah County, and what changes are being made to avoid the recurrence of the problems that occurred about 18 months ago?
So in addition to the Mental Health Crisis Assessment and Treatment Center, and I want to be clear, that was the top priority, both of the mayor's task force as well as a convening of 200 public safety officials in Multnomah County. There are many things that we're doing in the wake of the chassis incident. We have greatly stepped up our crisis intervention services. The city and the county jointly invest in something called Project Respond. We have 24/7 crisis lines. We have 24-hour walk-in crisis clinics now. In addition, in all of our Multnomah County health clinics, we have 5 community-based clinics. We have now combined both basic medical services and mental health services. That's just the first steps we've already taken. Longer-term things that I think we should do is we should go back to a community center-based model of mental health delivery so that people who live with mental health issues are surrounded by people who are experiencing the same thing they are on a day-to-day basis. And we know that that peer support is very important to a person's their outlook over the course of a day. An area where Multnomah County, I think, was very weak and where we've worked hard to strengthen our mental health delivery is actually by working more closely with our own clients and the advocates for those clients. The relationship has really been a fairly adversarial one over the last many years. And what we all agreed to do when we settled this James Chassis case, I'm talking about the legal case, for Multnomah County, we agreed it was time to move on and work together to structure a system that makes sense and advocate for funding at the state level that we need to increase our services around mental health. We need to stop coming to loggerheads and start engaging this Army to work with us to get the resources that we need for mental health services in the community. I hope that answers your question.
Edward Hershey, City Club member, you opened and then most recently referred again to the Chassis case, which may be fresh in our minds in the aftermath of still another tragic confrontation between police and an agitated individual. You chose to settle the case. The city has not. That's their call. I wonder if you agree with their legal contention that a jury of our fellow Multnomah County residents could not be impaneled to fairly consider and decide the case.
I cannot answer that question because I don't know the answer to it. I am not an attorney. I'll give you my opinion. It's an uninformed, uneducated opinion. I do believe that you can find impartial people in this community on any number of subjects. The key is finding people who are okay with being wrong now and again. And that's how you overcome bias. You overcome it with facts, with communication, with explanation, and with stories. And I do believe that there are people in this community who are open-minded. And I think that's all I need to say on this subject. Yes, sir.
Wade Fickler, City Club member. Chair Wheeler, you mentioned early childhood programs as one of your prevention strategies. Can you say more about your plans and the status of those plans?
Yes, I can tell you this. We have applied for a major grant with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. We've outlined a very aggressive strategy to work with early childhood providers in this community to provide a unified strategy around support for young children. That includes not only educational program, but also health and social services support for those youth and their families. I would expect that we'll hear sometime this month about the success of that grant. Whether or not we get the grant, we're going to continue to move forward and pursue strategies with approximately 25 community-based partners that we've tentatively identified as being good partners to put together an overall plan for early childhood.
I'm back. Susan Pierce, member. Another question, how many or which of the Multnomah County, of the recommendations from the Multnomah County Contracts Action Team from January of last year, how many of those recommendations have been implemented, and can you elaborate?
At this point, I would be wise to bring Jana McClellan, who's actually running that I won't, don't worry. How many, Jana, have we implemented? I would encourage you not only to watch the replay of this speech on cable television, I would encourage you to watch the Board of County Commissioners meeting on Thursday when Chief Operating Officer Jana McClellan will report to the Board of County Commissioners our progress on the large contract management recommendations. And her answer to me was several of the recommendations have already been implemented, some are still in progress. Can you wait till Thursday when they actually report out the results? I cannot elaborate today. Thank you.
Joe Sixtus, City Club member. I have sort of two questions relating to the library system. The first one is the Sun School program is really an interesting program because it uses an existing sort of community resource of the building and expands on it. Has there been any consideration of using the public libraries to provide and make more contact with social services in homeless communities that are using the library during the day? And then secondly, has there been a consideration for expanding the library program but not having books at some of the branches and just having public computer labs that can be used by patrons?
Excellent questions. First, with regard to using the libraries as an outreach vehicle for broader social purposes, we already do that. We're very aggressive in terms of our outreach programs. We not only have programs through the Sun Schools, but we also have our Everybody Reads program, which I think people are engaged in this year. We have operations in both our adult corrections facilities, our jails, as well as our juvenile justice facility. We do outreach to facilities where older adults are living. So we're already doing a great many things in that area. As far as Computer labs, we have computers in our facilities. You can bring your own computer into any of our library facilities and access the Wi-Fi. We have, in fact, in recent months, talked with one of our community colleges about a potential partnership in East County, but it's only at the very conceptual level around community-based computing and community-based access to data and information.
Ted Kay, City Club member. It appears that PERS is heading for a disaster, and it's acting out in the form of higher and higher contributions from our municipal governments to the PERS system. Would you comment on the impact on Multnomah County and what you think might be done about PERS?
So Ted, obviously you were the guy who was set up to ask all the tough questions this year. PERS is a issue that Multnomah County, and I don't know if Mindy Harris is here today, but she and her team, their finance team, were really visionary in terms of evaluating the potential unfunded liabilities of our own retirees and PERS in terms of the county's bottom line. We've been very deliberate in managing our liability. As far back as 1999, we started putting set-aside accounts out there to help cushion our PERS obligations. I believe we were the first jurisdiction in the state of Oregon, or certainly one of the first to actually do that. So we've benefited from several run-ups in the valuation of our side account. We also hold aside 3% of our payroll additionally in order to help cushion our PERS obligations. So whereby we have a large unfunded liability for our own employees, the fact is we're in much better shape than most jurisdictions. Each of the last 3 years, we've added on that 3% set aside to our own employee salaries. So I'm thinking Multnomah County's in pretty good shape. I'm thinking from the state perspective, this is an issue that I would encourage you, as you have the gubernatorial candidates come in, ask them what their level of commitment is to reevaluating PERS. My personal perception is the legislature is probably not in the mood to discuss it at this moment. I think it's an executive issue. I believe it's something where the governor needs to lead and really drive communication both between the employees of the state who've done their bit and looking at the financial needs and risks to the state of Oregon going forward. And at Multnomah County, I feel we're doing a great job of managing that liability. Yes?
Melody Rose, City Club member. Chair Wheeler, you've talked about a number of capital projects, and I'm glad to hear about those, but you haven't mentioned anything about the downtown courthouse, and I wonder what your plans might be for that.
I'd like to acknowledge my staff. In all seriousness, sorry, Sam, I couldn't resist. This is a tough issue. The downtown courthouse is in terrible shape. It obviously needs to be replaced. It's about a $200 million project, and I can tell you the public would not support a bond today if we put it on the ballot. So we're going to have to be a lot more creative, and again, I would call on developers and creative people in our community to think of a mixed-use opportunity or some creative way that we could use the two properties that we've cited downtown to actually build a courthouse and make a compelling case to our citizens that it is worth their tax dollars to do it. Now, I'm convening a group along with our Chief Justice Demunez, Chief Justice of the Oregon Supreme Court, to look specifically at the Multnomah County Courthouse. It's very important to him as it is to me. A quarter of all the legal business in the state is conducted in that facility. It's very important to the economic vitality of Portland because of all the legal infrastructure that's located in the community. And it's one of those issues where again, like the Selwood Bridge or the East County Courthouse, I don't think we should put it off and push it on to a next generation. I think it has to be addressed now, because if we require our citizens to go into that building, and we do in two ways, either as defendants or as jurors, then we owe them the courtesy of providing them with a building that is sufficient and not in danger of either being a fire risk or a potential earthquake hazard.
Kurt Wavering, member. I'm on the board of West Women's Domestic Violence Shelter Advisory Council, and the picture I understand is they're basically have full occupancy all the time, and they do staff part of the time the women's crisis line. But it seems to me that there just isn't enough facilities, not only for crisis shelter, but then the ongoing need for counseling, helping people with jobs and education, and of course, eventually for shelter, for long-term housing. And I'm just wondering what your perception is of this issue, and I'm glad that you raised the question of domestic violence.
Right. And I apologize, it's a little hard to hear right where I am between these speakers. It reverberates. So I believe you asked about, in addition to domestic violence shelters, what else can we do given that the shelters we have are full? One of the things that we can do is the partnership that we have with the City of Portland around a one-stop domestic violence shelter. The first thing is getting people in the doors and having them understand that there is support for them, that there is safety for them. A lot of women, I am told, I'm not an expert on this subject, but I am told going to the courthouse and filing for restraining orders is very cumbersome, it's intimidating. They'll be able to do all of these things that are so-called one-stop domestic, it's really probably a better term for it, is a comprehensive domestic violence services center. And so that is the commitment that Commissioner Saltzman and Jeff Kogan were over here when he was Dan's chief of staff. They worked for a number of years on putting that model together, and it's finally in the position where we're going to kick it off pretty soon here. That's a good start. And beyond that, I think the next step is really raising the community's awareness about domestic violence. People don't know very much about it. And they need to. And so that's why I put the call to action in my speech today. I want you, as the most informed citizens and most engaged citizens in this community, to help get the word out. And there's quite a few good services, by the way. The Portland Women's Crisis Line. We have a child abuse hotline at Multnomah County. There's a number of organizations that I am hoping we will help raise the voice of in the coming years around the issue of domestic violence. Thank you for asking, sir. Thank you. See you next year.
Please join us on February 19th for a discussion about environmental entrepreneurialism and green markets. And as we close, please join me in expressing our appreciation for today's speaker, Chair Ted Wheeler. We adjourn.